Which zoom lens should you buy? If you don't know me already, I go by That One Camera Guy. I do tutorials, guides, and reviews on Sony mirrorless equipment and gear. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on the latest content. And while you're at it, smash that like button because it always helps out with my channel. Today's video is a focus on a buyer's guide for those of you wondering which normal zoom lens you should pick up for your Sony mirrorless full frame body. I mean, I might talk a little bit about APS-C, but for the most part, the focus is on your full frame camera like an A7 II, A7R II, even A7 III, for example. Now, this isn't a review. I just want to clarify that. It's more of looking at each lens and sort of comparing it against the next and looking at price ranges and what features these lenses offer. So I've got a variety of price ranges starting at about a few $100s all the way up to the top of the line 24 to 70 G Master that I have here with me. And so I've actually went out and rented a couple of these lenses and I've been testing them out over the last couple days. I haven't really had a chance to use them necessarily in a rigorous environment or an event environment where I'd like them to be tested in, but just some general photography to get a good feel of the overall quality of that particular piece of glass. I'm also going to throw in talking a little bit about adapting your lenses and whether or not it's an option. Maybe you're coming from Canon or Nikon, and maybe you're looking at an adapting process and seeing whether or not it's worth your dime at all to just grab an adapter and use your lenses. So we're going to look at that as well. So let's go ahead and dive into the video. First of all, I want to go over the 28 to 70 kit lens. This lens is sort of your first brush with a full frame lens because it's a kit lens. It comes in with the A7 II, the A7 Mark III. So quite a few of you probably have considered getting this or you already own this. It's an f3.5 to 5.6 lens. So at 28 millimeters, it's at f3.5. When you go to 30 millimeters, it goes to f4. So that's what this is doing. It's a variable aperture zoom lens, so you're losing light. Now this, if you're looking at the A7 III kit, if you're going to buy that, notice that this lens is about an additional $200, where it retails by itself for about $300, a little more than that or so, depending on where you get the lens. The question is it worth it? In my opinion, if you don't own any lenses already coming into the Sony system, I highly recommend that you buy your full frame camera with this kit lens. It isn't going to be a great performer in lower light conditions. So, for example, let me explain what happens with this lens, why it's so inexpensive, because of the variable aperture that it has when you zoom the lens in. So if you're using this lens for video, for example, and you're at 28 millimeters at f3.5, if you zoom the lens out to 70 millimeters, what's going to happen is the exposure is going to decrease. So the picture quality or whatever you're recording is going to drop in exposure. It's going to get darker. If you're taking photos, for example, let's say you are indoors, you're taking some event pictures inside of a room, you're at 28 millimeters and you're at f3.5. Maybe you're at ISO 3200, for example. All of a sudden, you have to go to 70 millimeters on your lens. When you go to 70 millimeters, your lens is going to go up to 5.6 as far as aperture is concerned. And you're going to find yourself having to shoot at about 6400 to 8000 ISO to compensate for that change in exposure because of your aperture change. Now, if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, don't worry. I am going to be making a full manual control video for a full frame. Now, I do have one for the Sony a6000, which you can check out over here, but I will do one for a full frame later on, explaining how to control your full frame camera completely in manual control. So that's the reason why this lens is so inexpensive, and but because of its nature, its lightweight, compactness, and its price, if you don't already own another lens, this is probably a really great one to add to your kit. If you are coming from the a6000, maybe you're coming from the a6300, I have a feeling that this lens might not really meet all your needs, and you may want to start looking at some other choices because you're really used to it. If you're just starting and this is what you have, take the lens. Now this lens came out sort of the early days of the Sony A7, A7R, and the A7S. It was a really interesting time for Sony because it showed that they were getting a little more serious about their cameras and their lens lineup for Sony E-mount for mirrorless. So this is the 24-70 Zeiss F4, and the difference of this one compared to this one, for example, is that it is a constant aperture lens. So the exposure is not going to change. Now this lens will probably retail for around $800 to $1,000. I'll post the prices so you can see them roughly what they're at this time. But I got my copy used and I got a pretty good deal. I think it was like $600 to $700 used that I got my copy. Now the reason why, like I said earlier, is the constant F4. What this means is if you're shooting video, for example, you're at 24 millimeters and you zoom all the way up to 70 millimeters, the brightness doesn't change at all. And that's really great. So for video or for photos, you're expecting the same exposure across the range. You don't have to adjust your shutter speed. You don't have to change your ISO based on, for the most part, your exposure values. That's what makes this a really great option for those of you who are looking for an upgrade from this. Now, I wouldn't say that this is going to give you the best quality in terms of performance across the board, but it's a great option if you're wanting to step up. That's the way I would look at it. If you do get a good copy, and I will talk a little bit about copy variation a little bit, definitely check your lens, test it out, make sure it's adequate for what the ranges are and what you expect it to be. You're going to be fairly happy with a lens like this. But this gets a lot more difficult to choose, especially with a recent release of this particular lens. So Sony released this one not too long ago. This is the 24-105 F4 G series lens. It's also constant aperture. The values are not going to change. Your exposure is not going to change if you're if you're zooming in and out of your lens. And what's really cool about this is that it does have a little more reach than the 24-70 Sony Zeiss lens here. So you're getting 35 additional millimeters of reach on the telephoto end. But let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about some of the features you get from this one that the other ones don't have. You have a focus hold button over here, which is going to allow you to set it to do other functions. For example, you can do eye autofocus. If you're doing portraits, you get an autofocus manual focus switch, which is really nice to have, especially in this day and age of lenses. And also you have a switch for the optical steady shot when you don't want it on or you want to activate it. Having tactile buttons and switches is always a lot faster than diving into your camera and changing those menus, especially if you're working on your, especially when you're taking your photos. I think that's great. I do like the zoom ring on this one. Very smooth, very rugged. I think this is also weather sealed. You have like a weather sealed rubber lining over here on the back. You also got a metal mount, obviously, and you are going to pay a little bit more. But I don't think it's an incredible amount that you're paying for this particular lens. And when I was using this and doing some tests with it, I found that across the board at F4, this lens performed really well. And stopping it down to 5.6, it got, just even better. But at F4, it's already pretty good wide open. So if you're wanting a lens that performs decently sharp across from edge to edge, for the most part, I'm not saying it's, blazingly sharp or something like that, but it's really good, right? Really good across the board, wide open at F4. This is a solid choice. It is going to be a little slower, and when I mean slower in terms of low light performance, you're not getting that f2.8, so you're losing one stop of light. The next lens we'll look at, I'll kind of dive in a little bit why that might be important to you based on your shooting needs. But if you are going to do maybe event shooting, event photography with this, you're definitely going to want to have a flash because F4 is a little bit slow. You're going to lose that stop of light and you're going to have to crank up your ISO. So definitely, it's kind of one of those lenses where you definitely want to add something like that, especially if you're doing events. But for general photography, daytime stuff, that thing's going to be an amazing pair with your full frame camera. Now this next lens is making some very interesting rounds right now, and it has a lot of some concerns for issues, but hopefully Tamron will address it. It's the newly released 28-75 f2.8 from Tamron. Now, this thing is very, very interesting, and why it's really piquing a lot of users' interest. One, it has to do with the price. The second, it has to do with the actual aperture value. It has a constant f2.8 aperture, which the other lenses that I've mentioned so far do not go that low in terms of its aperture. It doesn't open up that much. So what does that mean for you? So if you look at the 24-105 G series lens at f4 versus an f2.8 lens, that's the difference of you shooting indoors at ISO 3200 versus ISO 6400. That could also be the difference for shooting sports from a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second versus 1/500, which is what you might need in order to freeze the action. Again, if these values don't make any sense, I will put out a video later on that goes over some of this information, so make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification if you're interested in a full manual control video for your full frame camera. That will be out later on. But that is what's going on with these particular lenses. It's compact in size. Now, one disadvantage this is going to have, which is interesting because it's similar to the kit lens, is it starts at 28 millimeters. You're going to lose 4 millimeters. Now, 4 millimeters might not sound like a lot, but there have been times where I've shot a group photo or an event, and I've had people all the way up to the very edges of the frame, to the very edges at a 24 millimeter lens. Sometimes I don't want that. 28 millimeters, you're going to get people to get cut off. And so when that kind of situation happens, you're going to have to work really hard to reconfigure a little bit, have people get in tighter in group shots. So for event photography, it might be kind of dicey in my opinion. You might want to get that 4 millimeters, but if you're never finding yourself in that situation, it might not be a big deal. So another thing I would consider if you're looking at this one versus the G Master 2470 is the price savings you get from this, because this goes for $799. You can go ahead and add in this bad boy right here, the 16-35 f4. So you can have a second lens. You can actually get both of these lenses for the price of a G Master series lens. So you can cover some of your wide end shots if you need those, and they'll perform a lot better at 24, between 16 and 24, especially with this lens. So the video is not about that, but something to keep in mind. Overall, sharpness is pretty good on this lens in terms of the center sharpness. There is vignetting, but you can correct that with peripheral illumination correction, or your software can correct that for you. So it's not such a big deal. Sharpness gets better when you stop down to around f4. But again, central sharpness is pretty good on this particular lens. So highly, highly recommend it. I would just wait right now if you don't already have a pre-order. Just wait for the firmware updates to see if it corrects it. This would be the only time I would not consider this lens if they can't correct the autofocus issue that this is having. Now, this video isn't sponsored by this company, but I wanted to let you know that I do have an affiliate program with Capture One. If you're looking for an all-in-one software to do some of your basic editing and management of your photos, consider checking out Capture One in the description below. And if you use my coupon code AMBDANNY, you can get 10% off your purchase. Now, if you're using Sony cameras, you can get 10% off the Sony branded version for Capture One, or you can go the route of Capture One Pro and get 10% off your order. Again, links will be in the description down below if you want to go in and check it out. And if you use my coupon code, you're supporting my channel and helping me continue producing these videos. Thanks. All right, the last couple lenses we're going to look at have to do with the 24-70 f2.8 range. Now, I don't own this lens, but it is one I am considering. It is the 24-70 G Master f2.8. Now, I absolutely love this lens, primarily because I owned the Canon 24-70, and I'm very used to the size. Some of you who are very conscious about the size and weight of your lens may want to avoid this, and I think if that is a concern, the 20-70 is your go-to lens. But there's some considerations with this one, so let's go over some of the features. This doesn't have built-in stabilization, just like the Tamron 20-75, and also the Tamron doesn't have any switches on there, so you can't change autofocus, manual focus, and there's no focus hold buttons. But on the 24-70 G Master, you get a focus hold button, so you can program that. You get an autofocus manual focus switch. Again, no stabilization built in. The focus ring and zoom rings are very nice. You do have a fairly large front element here at 82 millimeter thread, so you're going to have to get a fairly large filter if you're going to put one on this particular lens. But this lens, when this came out, really showed Sony was very serious about their mirrorless technology, right? Their mirrorless cameras, because they came a long way from the 2470 f4, and all of a sudden you got this monstrosity of an f2.8, which a lot of people criticize. They're saying, well, you want smaller lenses for the mirrorless system, but they were trying to accommodate the professional shooters who wanted a fast zoom lens or normal zoom lens like this one. And in terms of its overall performance, I think it's actually pretty good. It's you really do have to put into perspective. For example, the Canon 2470 f2.8 Mark II actually performs a lot better in terms of overall sharpness across its range. These lenses tend to get weaker towards the 70 millimeter range, so you'll have to stop down a little bit if you want really great performance. But you get a lens like this for versatility and performance, especially for event photography. That's where I would look at it. Do not get this lens if you're trying to replace prime lenses. If ultimate sharpness is something you are looking for, these particular zoom lenses that you've seen today are not necessarily what you want to grab. You want to get a specialized prime lens for that particular focal length. This is a lens I'd recommend if you're shooting weddings, shooting events, and even sports shooting I would consider as well. And here's something interesting. I know there's a lot of discussion about the 28-70, and I think this is a perfect lens for amateur enthusiasts, hobbyists, and semi-pros who might not need maybe all the bells and whistles that you get from a 24-70 like this one. But let me talk about some of the benefits with this. So if you are like me and you picked up a Sony A9 early on and you paid full retail price, if you want to take advantage of the 20 frames per second, you are going to need to grab this particular lens. Now, you can obviously get 20 frames per second on your 24-105, but when it comes to this one here, you're only going to get about 9 to 10 on your Tamron. But with the 24-70 f2.8, you're going to get the 20 frames per second. You're going to get really great autofocusing speed and performance, a little bit better in terms compared to the Tamron. So if you want the best performance, this is it. Another benefit is if you are part of Sony Pro Support, they will service this if there's any issues. If there's a problem, you can send it in, get a loaner, whatever it needs to be, Sony Pro Support will be able to help you out. When it comes to this Tamron, if you're shooting out in the field and something happens with this, well, you're kind of SOL a little bit. Sony's not going to service this. You got to go to Tamron, and it could take a little bit longer. But if you're part of Pro Support, Sony's got your back with a lens like this. Okay, so that is where I would put all these lenses into check. The last sort of situation is if you're coming from legacy glass, or I guess I wouldn't say legacy glass, but this is an older generation Canon 2470. Really love this lens. I've had it for a long time now. And it actually performs really good with the MC11. Now, I have the Metabones, but I haven't really had a chance to use it with the Metabones adapter. But I did shoot with it with the MC11, with the A7 III, for example, the A7R3. And the autofocus isn't going to be what I would say adequate for events. But if you're kind of just shooting around, it's slower pace environments, the adapter actually works fairly well. I would not be hard-pressed to use it. In terms of optical quality, it looked very good across the range. I was very impressed with the overall performance of this Canon lens, especially since it's the first generation one. But if you're in this particular situation and you want really exceptional glass, and you already own this, for example, you might want to consider grabbing the MC11 adapter and just tacking it on there. It's if you can get this on sale for about $150, I think it's definitely worth it. But if you are using this for event shooting, this particular combination, I wouldn't recommend it. And at that point, if you can, I would consider looking at the 2470 G Master if you're kind of in that professional working environment that you need that ruggedness and that pro support. Or if you fall just a little underneath that, the 20-75 might be one to consider. So, there you go. Those are a lot of lenses to think about, a lot of lenses to choose from. I know a lot of you have some anecdotal and some experience with a variety of these lenses. Please leave your experiences and your suggestions down in the comments below. Which lens would you pick up? Which ones do you already own? And which ones have you had good experiences and bad experiences? Because all these lenses sort of have their pros and their cons, and some of you will probably get into more detail about their actual image quality. But I'm speaking more on just the general terms of which one you should consider getting. So let's go ahead and quickly review. If you're just starting off, this one, and you don't own any Sony lenses, you have to get this kit lens. It's a must. You must get this one, okay? The 24-70, at this time, I don't really recommend this that much anymore. The 24-70 f4, I would push you towards the 24-105 f4. I know it's still difficult to get in stock, but stock is improving. You just have to wait maybe a couple weeks to get it in. But if you had to decide between these two, I would try to pony up the extra cash and go straight to the 24-105 f4. You won't be disappointed at all. If you're looking between these two lenses, the 24-70 and the Tamron 24-70, the G Master one, right? Again, professional shooter, professional environment, and you have pro support, and you have the A9. Definitely go with the 24-70 G Master. Just make sure that you check for copy variation. So I was never a big fan of doing wall tests and shooting at the various ranges, but it's a really great opportunity to see it. Now, I actually did some lens testing with this one with 2 copies. And what was really crazy was that I saw some serious lens variation. So this is actually from Pro Support. I asked for a loaner to check it out, and so it came from Lens Rental. What happened was I tested it with Jason Bong's copy of his 24-70, and I found that his 24-70 was actually sharper, wide open across the different focal lengths. So that was a big shocker. So definitely make sure you are checking for lens variation or any issues. So this obviously is a lens that's been used, maybe it's been banged up or something, but definitely check for those things when you get these lenses. The 20-75 is probably what most of you are going to be happy with, like 90% of you. It's just that they got to get the firmware fixed. So when they get the firmware autofocus situation corrected, you'll be good to go. Folks, that's going to do it for me in this video. If you found any benefit out of it, don't forget to smash that like button. Always helps me out. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on the latest content. And information about these lenses and links are in the comments and description down below. And with that said, I'm your host, That One Camera Guy, and I will catch you on the next video. Peace.
I left my heart in California. I let it go deep into the blue. I could be happy in California.